Hi. Thank you all for coming. Sometimes such a wonderful evening like this outside. Coming to hear to this. Obviously the main thing we want to try and talk about is the pavilion here at the Expo, which is opening tomorrow. But I was also asked if we could say something about the practice and where we are, and show some other current projects and things that we're working on. And whenever I do this, which is not very often, to stand up and talk, I actually like to begin by making it very clear that I'm a representative only of all the people who are working, not only in our company, Foster & Partners, but also in the engineering companies, technology companies, people who build things we work very closely with. It's a very collaborative effort. It's not any one individual, it's how those individuals come together. And it's a key part of everything that we do. So the office here in London is the main location for a lot of our activities. But obviously, increasingly with people and presences around the world, we're having to work on new ways of making connections to those other practices, because we also want people who are on the ground running projects to be participating in the design. And therefore, a lot of our systems and communications are actually very, very critical in order to make it all work. And I mentioned collaborative. It's not, the architect quite often has got this image of sitting alone in a room somewhere with a sketchbook, just actually producing all the ideas that then are handed out to everybody else. And it never has worked like that in our practice. And to this day, gatherings of people such as this around a particular project occur very often. And we're trying to get as much of the experience and the thinking and the brain power of all these people focused together on a project, right from the very beginning all the way through to the end. And the nature of the teams has also been changing now, particularly very intensively in the last 2 years in our practice. It's no longer just architects and engineers. We've been very fortunate, partly because of our scale. It's one of the advantages of becoming bigger, that we can actually have research people, we can have specialists coming together. So this photograph of the practice just taken really almost at random. If you then identify the disciplines that everybody has in this picture, you see it's already very mixed, and they're very close to one another, and therefore the dialogue, the participation between people, can become very, very intense and very broad. And it's leading us to be able to think more and more about what we call integrated design, design that actually brings more and more factors into the equation, and again, right from the very beginning, to develop the projects all around the world. We've also managed to think about, with the process now of having architectural teams in a very traditional way, but also have a whole range of expertise in different disciplines. So this one here looks at the bigger picture. This is Bruno, who runs our urban planning group. And they get involved, obviously, with very large-scale projects. And the thrust of what they do is really try to sort of focus on how people live, how people work, how people move around cities. What can we do as designers in order to make that easier, to make life better, to make things more efficient and work better? So on all of our master plans we do that, and in amongst it the technology is informing us on every occasion. So here the screen that you see is really using a software model, a computer model that we developed partially in-house and partially with expertise, that in master planning terms allows you to put together plans, densities, and actually then try things out, like the wind blowing through, how people might move from place to place, how shadow falls and what the views are like. And we can do that and change it real time, which speeds up the process and allows us to get a greater in-depth relationship with the overall plans that we're developing. And the same happens internally. We're very focused on the workplace. How people work and interact together is crucial to architecture, to life in general. And therefore this group really actually work on all the projects in one way, shape or form. And they gather knowledge, as indeed all the specialist groups do. They work across all the projects, and they gather data, knowledge, and experience, as it were, horizontally through the design process, that then we can then plough back into the actual design itself. So these guys here really, look at a project when it arrives as a brief, or if there's no brief, they go out with the architects and actually start to develop one with the client. And they also live the experience. Their studio space is something that's dynamic. They don't allow themselves to sit at the same place every day. They have to keep on moving around. They have close contacts with furniture manufacturers, and we bring those in and live with them for a while and see what it's like. Can we use this? Is this working very well? These two here is the guy who runs the workplace consultancy and the head of our industrial design group, and they have a very close collaboration, as you can imagine, as we work on projects together. Everything is informed by materials, and when I started all those years ago, everybody had their pet box underneath the desk with all those materials that you liked, and you kept it under your desk. We decided many years ago that was the wrong idea, and actually what we should do is create a centre, bring them all into one place, and then employ a series of research people who are constantly looking out there to the big wide world about what's happening with material technologies, what happens on specialist techniques and processes and other things, and they participate in projects really from that materials standpoint. That's a key part of what we do. Model making has been fundamental, and I'm very pleased to say is becoming even more so, and not just because of 3D printing, but the use of models in architecture has never dropped, never died, it's only increased. I think with whatever we can get with computer visualizations, there's something about the physical models, whether they're very basic, like the ones here I can see, and which are quite a simple, crude foam models in the early stages. This is a museum in Florida on the bottom, and then our main big workshop that we actually produce not only big scale models but also full-size mock-ups as well. 3D printing has changed everything, and we've brought it into our office, and we use it extensively, and I'll show you something a bit later of where we've got to in terms of that thinking. We also have to be about communication. I'm always amazed that, and it's always been this way, in architectural education, we're never ever taught how to communicate. It's not taught, design is taught, engineering is taught, but communication, getting those ideas across to people who are going to have to pay for the building and actually live in the building, is never something that's taught. And we've been very fortunate, I suppose, to work with Norman, who's one of the great communicators, and learn as much as we can. Obviously not as good as him, as you can see. But nevertheless, communication is central. And more the use of film is coming in to do that. People's attention span seems to be getting shorter and shorter. So the idea of using a film is very crucial. So we have a film unit now in-house who do everything, real-time filming, but also animation and 3D modeling as well. All of it is about the real world and getting things built. And a number of years ago, we created a construction review group who look at every project that we do as it moves from the different design stages. But when it gets very serious into the construction documentation, this team come in and supplement the teams that are working on the individual projects to be sure that we get all the thinking correct, all the regulations are going to work through, all the standards in the different countries are being adhered to, and the detailing experience from the past is transferred over to today.
It's not a building, and it's not the physicality of a studio. It's the philosophy, the way in which, beyond my lifespan, that will move on and have its own life. That, I think, is the most difficult design of all, and the one I'm most proud of.
looking at some projects. These are sort of a fairly random take on things, just as I was looking through to see what we've completed recently and what's currently being developed. This opened last year. This is the Yacht Club in Monaco, which has been a very long-running project, not least of which because we had to create the ground that it sits on. It was actually water going back to where you see the other buildings until we actually started to do that. It's a yacht club. Obviously, it's very exclusive, but it's a key cultural part of everything that happens in Monaco. If you live there, you're encouraged to learn how to sail and to row and all things to do with the sea, right from school age. So here there is sort of sailing schools along the lower levels, boat storage. You see groups like the one in the foreground going out. And it also acts as a kind of civic centre if there are major events, which there are many in Monaco. Equestrians, obviously Formula One. This is a new standing platform to watch the Formula One races. But it also is hired out by various people to have meetings and have sessions and dinners and things like that, which would all be part of the overall life of the principality. The interiors, something we developed, really for us this was the first time we actually put everything that you see there on the cases and on the shelves. Somebody else would normally do that, but our team did it this time, and they came up with a brilliant idea of putting all the books by organising them by colour, which seemed to be very popular. Slightly unusual way of doing it, but nevertheless was very popular. So projects like that, all the way through to the detail of something that were interesting. On the other end of the scale, still with the marine connotations, this is the cruise terminal building, which we again recently completed last year in Hong Kong. This is on, for those of you that know Hong Kong, this is where Kai Tak Airport used to be. So this is built on the runway of the old airport for Hong Kong, and is already receiving passengers now from these Asian-based cruise liners that move around from location to location, coming through here into customs, concrete structure. And then this is another 4 projects. There are 4 loosely identical stations that we are developing and nearly finishing in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has decided to build a series of knowledge cities, and the railway links them all together, and there's a new station in each location. And they're very large buildings. And interestingly, as I said, the design is more or less the same in each one, because the brief and the program and the numbers are the same. But for each station, because of the scale and the fact they're all being built at once, each station has its own different contractor. So the people building it are very different in this station to the next one and the other 3. And so different, it means that although the thing will look the same in both instances, all the details are completely different. So the team that has been seeing it through and still living down there, to go through and do the work, which we always like to do, and has happened here with the Expo. They're actually trying to translate the design of this building into 4 different scenarios. So I'll give an example. The roof panels on the top here, one of the companies decided to build an oven on the site and bake them locally and then crane them into position. Another contractor decided to fully scaffold the entire area and make them out of a lot of small pieces. So all the details are all different in each one. And this gives you a feeling for that station as it's nearing completion now. Another project, and again opened very recently, this is the Imperial War Museum in London. It's something which is a building that's been modified many times over a long period, a 19th century building originally, but changed. And again, working with specialist museomographers and people within the museum themselves to try and find the best ways of displaying these quite large, unusual objects. And this is phase 1 of 3 phases. This has been completed, and was everything with fundraising type projects. You have to do it in manageable pieces. So this is really the first of 3 phases. Another building, again, working to existing. This is a museum in Munich, Lambach House, which was a a very mid-19th century villa that an artist had and created, and then gradually over the years it had been added to. There was a particularly ugly bit that was put on in the 1970s, which was full of asbestos and had to be replaced, and therefore the block you see there is the replacement. And again, we had an opportunity on this project, which doesn't happen on all of them, but to really collaborate very closely with artists. So Olafsson here did this piece specially for the museum. So you can see the new architecture, the old architecture, and art combining together in some new and quite exciting ways. It's a great museum. It has the world's best collection of Kandinskys and the Blue Rider Group. And obviously they're working very closely with the curator, who is also the world's expert. Is a great privilege to actually understand about the artist and think about that when you're actually designing the gallery in a very direct and informed way. And obviously for us, the human part of the experience of buildings, where people gather, tends to be around food. It's no accident that the expo here, the theme is about food, and food is a great thing for bringing people together to talk and to meet. And really, for us, the urban life, the city life, is very, very crucial. So all of the projects that we do, this public realm, as we refer to it, is very crucial and is not normally covered in the brief for a particular project. It's something you have to bring to it. I have to add and draw out and actually increase the potential for people to enjoy the architecture that we all create. And this is another very strong human interaction project. This is one of in the UK we have the Maggie's Centres, which is all to do with kind of giving help and advice for those people who have cancer. In Britain, that's a fairly tough experience to discover that you've got it, and very, very hospital-like and very institutional. So Maggie's was set up a number of years ago, really to actually, make that whole experience something that you could get information, you could get advice, you could get help. So these centres, and there are many of them now in the UK. This was ours. It was chosen to be Manchester because Norman was born in Manchester, so it seemed to be a good idea. And interestingly, all of us decided that it should be timber, independently of each other, the whole team on this. And quite why that was, we still can't work out, but we all felt that it should be a timber building. But if we were going to do a timber building, we should really try and push that a little bit. This is Charles Jenks on the left there. He's a famous, as you probably know, architecture critic, very informed man. And it was his wife, called Maggie, who died. And the lady at the end is called Laura, who she nursed Maggie in those final hours. So they themselves got together and decided that they should create these centres. And they do, wonderful work. If you ever get a chance to go and see one, just walk in, they'll welcome you, and just watch for about half an hour and you'll see what they do. Timber, if we're going to use timber, how in the past had timber been used? And we got very excited about World War I aircraft hangars, which actually were made out of very thin bits of timber, a top boom and a bottom, top boom and a bottom piece, and then in between them this lattice type construction. So we developed that into the design and repeated it. And this was literally this time last week up in an uncharacteristically sunny Manchester. Normally it rains a lot, which we designed this roof with big overhangs to keep you out of the rain. But it was very, very sunny. And this is the first piece that was erected. And again, fantastic collaboration. The contractor here was in Switzerland, they're a great company. They kind of start with a log and they go all the way through and produce the timber and produce this. Everything along the way that's not used is not wasted. It's recycled into fuel pellets. The bark is reused. And actually the whole energy that's used in their plant is actually using the same timber. And all the wood, which is spruce, comes from within about a 500-mile diameter of their location. So a wonderful story as well as the kind of project. Completely different. This is in Buenos Aires. And this is a project we've always been calling Banco. And it was called Banco because it was for a bank. And about 6 months before we finished, the bank decided not to move in, and instead to give the building to the government. So it's now a kind of the city of Buenos Aires City Hall, which they're very delighted with. And thanks to the flexibility, it seems to work pretty well. They're all very happy now they've moved in. This is on the opening day, orchestra playing down the bottom, brilliant sunshine. This is sort of concrete roof, concrete columns. Steel is very expensive in this part of the world, and therefore, right from the very beginning, it was to be concrete. It's tough, direct, very simple, and it's in a type of building that we do from time to time where it's very unforgiving. Every single detail in this building is visible. There's nothing hidden away. You see absolutely everything. And it occasionally occurs, we notice that, and you realize the amount of time and effort you have to put in is huge, because everything is there. Everything has to be thought about, considered, and designed in a ways that maybe with some other projects you might be able to hide some bits behind something, but not something like this. Everything is there to be seen. This is another one. This is now in Yale. And again, I think we got this building because Norman went to Yale, Manchester, Yale. There's a sort of pattern here, isn't there? I can see it. This is a school of management. And really it's about sort of business and teaching people how to sort of work and connect with one another. It is extremely interesting about architecture today, this project, because, okay, as a building, it is what it is, but it's a phenomena that is occurring across the whole world, which is that now this building's complete, we are the only ones left from the team. Everybody in the client team has gone. So the head of the university's changed. We're on our third school of management head, and all the people that used to hit us over the head to make the cost savings have all gone as well. So it's kind of interesting, and it's happening more and more in the world as things speed up, as our communication takes place. We're finding that we start a project with one group of people and you'll end it completely with a different bunch of people, which is very difficult and makes obviously continuity hard, but we're there, so we seem to be providing the continuity. But it's an interesting topic for discussion. This building also, we did a huge amount of research at the time. This was designed probably about 5 years ago now. The teaching of people was moving along. There were a lot of experimental things happening in America at the time to do with education like this. So the space is designed for, as well as formal presentations such as you see here, the staff can literally pace up and down in between everybody and challenge somebody by leaning over the desk at them. And it's a very direct and interactive process. That interaction, again, is being evident more and more in all different walks of life. And in London, London has become a kind of real focal point for many people in the world, to do with economic problems elsewhere, to do with the whole Middle Eastern question, and the ever-increasing mobility of people from China. It's put huge pressure to London in terms of development, and which people see as good and bad. But one thing for certain, it's really actually taken this particular plot. This is Battersea Power Station in London, which has been a derelict site for about 40 years. People have tried to sort this out, but it's only this incredible hiatus of people coming to London, residential prices going through the roof, that makes sense to actually solve this problem. And that's what's actually happening. So Malaysian group are in here now, building this, and we are doing one of the buildings, the one on the right-hand side. Frank Geary's doing the ones in front. And ours is a very interesting building from several points of view, not least of which it's about 300 meters long and about 14 stories high. It has huge holes in it which you can't see here to allow light and air through into this central circulation space. And at one end of it there's a hotel. In the middle, one person has bought 6 apartments that they're going to join together, and at the other end there's social or affordable housing. I don't know how you refer to that here. So in one building you have all of the stratas of society trying to exist in the same project, and they're all really brought together. This is the way through. very dense development towards the original power station. And all of those people are brought together with this 300-metre long park that actually is going to run along the top of the whole roof of that building, giving incredible views all over the city and an amenity to everybody that lives there. Another scale, this is really furniture and interiors, which is more and more becoming things that we really get heavily involved with. This is the lounge for Cathay Pacific in Hong Kong. And again, the collaboration, our industrial designers joined the architectural team for this, and in a very rapid period, we developed this chair called the Solace chair that was made by Poltronofrau. And again, our relationship with them was very good. People who make things over a long period of time we've worked with, we're able to do things very fast because we know each other and know the methodologies. And really this was a great success in terms of the overall performance. There are 4 lounges in Hong Kong. They're all different from each other. So they're all now fully operational. And on another scale altogether, I think we're working on 3 other airports as well as this one. We're working in Doha and in Kuwait and also in Panama. But this is Mexico City. This is a project that we won through a competition, in the last few months, really. It's to be a very large airport building. And again, looking at very wide-span roof forms, using technology that was actually been developed in Mexico. Seems like surprising, but small component, space frame type technology has actually been developed there, and we're working very closely with those people as well as our own engineers and international engineers to achieve that. Now, this is another Foster and Partners project. This one, we were told they don't want to make it look good. That's not the job here. There's another job, which is to make it perform better. This is a tent. This is a project we're doing with the Red Cross and with the Red Cross in Turkey to look at a company, a manufacturer who produces this design of disaster relief accommodation. And they asked us to get involved to help them, not make it look good, but to improve the design, to improve the performance, because these tents there's a tent, and in normal kind of European climate, it probably will be okay. When it gets extremely cold or hot, then these become very difficult to use, particularly cold. And therefore, how do we insulate? What do we do? How would that work? And this, I hope if it runs, will give you some not getting any sound, but with materials research, we looked at a whole range of things. It has to be collapsible, foldable, easily transportable.
Hello, this is day 4 in Ulaanbaatar. What we're gonna do this morning is to collect all the ethers and clear up the space. This position is quite easy to understand how the camp has been set up. Here, the tent, as you can see, the stove is situated here. This is the stove that we've been using for the real simulation, and it's a coal burning stove.
This had to be done very rapidly, and as well as the insulation material on the inside of the tent and the materials for building it up. Also, how power was generated and how it worked had to be something that was a key part of the overall solution. So in amongst here, there is a stove, and we tried to find existing stoves that were on the market, and that's what we did for this one. But our next piece of the project is to redesign that and make that part of the story. So, if the tent wasn't meant to look beautiful, this one certainly had to. This is a project we did for a North American technology company that we've been working with for some time. The test will, can I get through this without saying the name? As well as the headquarters building that we're developing for them. We have now for a few years been working on the future development of the stores. And this is the first one that's being constructed. This is in Turkey, in Zorlu, in Istanbul. And it's a roof light. And it's enabled us to really work again with manufacturers and with technical experts to develop the whole glass technology that they obviously, to some extent, have pioneered in many instances. So this roof is actually, the glass is holding up the roof. There's no other structure there, and we're doing similar things on other projects with them. This is really a generation, and we designed this about 2 years ago, working with them very closely, and developing elements like the ceiling system here to go through. We've since gone on and done a lot more. But it's a wonderful opportunity for us to do, again, this word integrated design. These projects and the way they're put together really are very, very tight. This floor here, which cantilevers out into the space, has tuned dampers in it to stop it vibrating. It's very thin. It has high performance materials on the floor structure. And we can only do that by working incredibly closely with engineers. And again, 2-3 years ago, we brought engineers into our own practice again, something we used to have in the very beginning. And not to work on all the jobs that we do, but to work on things that are very intense. You know, the electrical, the mechanical, the structure, the architecture is so fused and pressurized on something like this. And really the results are quite astonishing because of that activity. And again, it's a little bit of an indicator of where we might be headed. Again, last week, this opened. This is one of 4 locations. This is for a new product that I think you wear somewhere about here, which has been launched and obviously is now out there, not yet for sale, I don't think. But this is a very different type of approach. You know, the way that you handle a wristwatch is very different from the way you would handle other bits of technology that they produce. And therefore, what's the environment for that? And this got some inspiration from another building we did together. And 3 of these opened simultaneously. They're quite small. This one's in Selfridges in London. There's one in the Galerie Lafayette in Paris and one in Isetan in Tokyo. And they all opened on the same day to be part of the experience. And again, working with a lot of very talented individuals. This project for the same company was really, again, a fast project we had to do. It's a restaurant in Cupertino for all of the staff that are in the many buildings that are waiting to be headquartered into one, or many of them will be in one. As it was a restaurant, we decided to make this a prototype of the design that we had developed so far for the main headquarters restaurant, which is much taller than this and much bigger. But all the design, the furniture, all the kitchen equipment and everything else, we sort of treated this as a prototype to learn from. And we've already made quite a few detailed changes that will be built into the headquarters building. But this is a standalone project. And we created this little garden space just outside. It's a perfect climate there. And this was one of those inspiration things that you see influencing the Selfridges project and the others that I mentioned to you. This is the headquarters, now well under construction. And for us, it's interesting, and comparing with the project that we're going to talk about here, the pavilion. This is really about standardization. It's going in the opposite direction to where a lot of architecture is. It's about designing one thing and making lots and lots of the same thing to create a building. And that was really part of the whole ethos of the project from the very beginning. And of course, the way we used to do it, that was the way we used to do it. Now you can make every panel different and everything more complicated. But we used to try and be standardized things to make them work. When you go back and do that, what's astonished us is the quality of the tooling and the quality of the pieces that you can make just leaps up. The steel molds fabricating the concrete work in this are just unbelievable. So we're getting a lesson backwards in time as well as forwards in time with how you do architecture. And this is our, I call this we call these projects distractions. They kind of distract you from the day job of being designing buildings. But they're very good for us. We've done 3 or 4 yacht projects now, and this is the latest. This was built in Turkey for a Turkish client, and it's meant to be a day boat. But these projects really help. It was a project like this that we brought 3D printing into the office to do it full time, which actually changed the way we do architecture. So things we learn from these, which are off to one side, really inform the mainstream eventually. So we're very lucky to be able to kind of work on projects like this that really give us new directions, new materials and new thoughts. Interiors. And I mentioned we have a product group that spends a lot of its time here in Milan. Obviously just north of here is where all the factories are that make the wonderful things that are Italian design. So whether it be light fittings here with Lumina, the components and the way it breaks down, the table in its setting, all of these things are really something which were a key part of everything that we do. And working with people, working with manufacturers in this instance is very strong. They have the ability of the team doing this to work outside with their own clients, I mean, still under our overall control, obviously. But they also work inside with the various teams to develop furniture and other components on projects. Even our construction group is developing products. We also get involved with some other interesting things. This was a project in St. Paul's Cathedral that, again, I mentioned working with artists. This is Bill Viola, who's a very famous American video artist, and he created this grouping. This is called the Martyrs. There's one called Mary, which is a very intense artwork located in St. Paul's Cathedral, which is incredibly sensitive and involving a lot of difficult processes. But it was nice to be able to work with him on doing something like that. Yeah, now that was 3D printing, but taken to another dimension. And again, working with people and collaborating, the 3D printing in our office, making models and things, is something that's led us into thinking about printing full-size buildings, which is a research project that's going on right now. And they're developing that, and we have sample pieces and things. And then by attending conferences and special seminars, our people met up with the European Space Agency, who asked us to work with them on something like this. And the idea of, it costs, I think, about $100,000 a kilo to get anything up into space. So anything you take up there is very expensive. So if you could actually use what's there, the dust of the moon, which we know a reasonable amount from the samples that's come back, and really take the equipment up there, one could think about building structures longer term on the moon. it was a very top secret project, and we did this about 5 years ago. But they, relatively recently, wanted to announce it and show it to everybody. So we were suddenly surprised when it all started to come out. But, a great opportunity. You realise we do have fun. Moving closer to Abu Dhabi and closer to the United Arab Emirates. This was our first project that we did. We've been working there now for about 12 years. And we were brought in to look at what was effectively a shopping centre with additional accommodation, a very dense development right in the heart of the city. And a key part of that was the souk, which was one of the first buildings to be built in Abu Dhabi. In the 1960s, nothing was here at all, nothing. So one of the very first buildings was the original souk, which sat on this part of the site here, and had to be demolished and had to be, transformed. And they wanted something that wasn't just another shopping centre, the international shopping centre, which we all see and experience as we move around the world. They wanted something that, how could we create something that belonged here in this place and be relevant to this kind of culture? And it was a souk. So we actually studied a lot of souks, measured them, took dimensions, and actually really kind of translated that into a more of a contemporary approach. And also with the patterning here, we worked very closely with an expert on Islamic geometry, Jean-Marc Caster, who's written a huge book on that. He studied it all of his life and said to him, look, we can't do this. It's not something that we have an ability to do. We'd like to work with you. Can you produce something that's contemporary but really makes a link with the long established decorative imagery that actually comes from this region and this place in particular? So he developed the designs for those panels. There are some glass stained panels as well. And then in the interior, we try to again avoid all the cliches of the modern shopping centre by actually thinking about the walls, the timber, filtering light, very strong light, about 3 times the amount of light here than you would get in Europe. So you can filter it through, again, colour glass roofs and other parts of it. And this has now been occupied. It's now fully occupied in our ground floor and is much richer than you can see. This is timber on the inside and GRC on the outside. Is one of our first explorations using that. Working again very closely with people, one of whom is sitting over there, who we've learnt a huge amount from. And I've never met anybody who's so enthusiastic as the man who's sitting over there, who I'll mention again in a minute or two. But this was a great opportunity and proved to be very popular. And obviously, it achieved a kind of resonance with people locally and also with everybody involved with things, which has led us on to be able to do other projects there. This is the most extreme. It's probably technically the most extreme project we've got under development at the moment. It's the Zayed National Museum, Abu Dhabi. So this building we felt ought to actually tackle those extreme environmental conditions. So we're using the heat, these wings, symbolic wings, for the roof structure, heat up intentionally and help draw air through the museum, which is under a mound, an earth heavily insulated mound, to actually create an airflow through the space so we can naturally ventilate in here for about 6 months or more of the year. And more of that project later. I mentioned Masdar. Masdar is an experimental city and a city scale project, but not a city as such. It's an experimental project at the scale of a city, or it will be eventually. We've now completed 2 phases here. They related to the university being the generator, which is an MIT managed, controlled and taught location with student residences, which is now occupied and been occupied for some time. We've recently opened the 2nd stage for that. And all the things that we planned, the idea of building buildings close together to actually provide shade and actually achieve a higher quality of climatic experience when you're here than you would otherwise do, is something that we kind of tried and tested through computers in order to actually be sure that what we were saying was going to work. But we also felt after it opened, we had to we had to go and test it. We had to get the real data. Architecture doesn't really allow you to be around after the building's completed, or even the engineers. So to get data of how a building performs, strangely, is something that's very hard to get. Nobody pays you to gather that. Nobody does it. So with our engineers and our specialists in the house, we decided to form a little group that would go around and check, the facts that the computer told us. Is it actually working? How is it performing in real time? And they did a number of visits and study, measuring the temperatures, humidity levels, looking for the real temperature. And we found that if we compared on the same day a central part of existing Abu Dhabi with the central part of Masdar, the concept of bringing the buildings together really sort of proves itself quite dramatically. These are sort of obviously heat images that actually give you the idea that on the left there, the white ground, the temperature of the surface is very, very high. And the radiant temperature in the space is also very, very high. Whereas you can see in Masdar, that drops considerably. Now, I know 37 degrees sounds a lot, but I've recently, in the last year, for the first 6 months, of going backwards and forwards to this region, and I've sort of monitored what it feels like when you're outside. And I got as high as 49 degrees. And as long as the humidity was rock bottom, and you had an airflow, it's actually okay. It's hot, but it's not debilitating in the way that it would be in other parts of the world at a much lower temperature with higher humidity. So although these temperatures look high, the feeling you're getting there is one that's very different. And here you can see a typical space, and the temperatures and the ground temperature, the way it reduces. The mere fact that those ancient cities in the past used to build close together, really, they did it through evolution, maybe hundreds of years, but there's always cooling, there's always shade. And the orientation of this city experiment really is such that the sun, where it falls, never completely fills the street. You always get shade in one part or another. Is one of the guys just stopped for lunch, and somebody checked him. This is in the wrong place, sorry. This went through, and you can see again a little bit of water on the floor, some greenery, and it changes the whole condition and the feeling with air movement running through. So the great thing is we have that data, which we've gathered ourselves. So moving now to expos. This is the first one that we did for the Emirates, which was in Shanghai. And the pavilion that you can see here really was evolved with pretty much the same team that we've developed the project here, in terms of the client body and ourselves, with some new expertise coming in as well. And this project was really never designed to be moved. It was meant to be a one-off project. And then during the run of the building, when the building opened, they felt it ought to be something that could be transported back to Abu Dhabi. And luckily, the way the design evolved, the steel frame, really allowed it to be dismantled and then transported back, which is actually what ultimately happened. But it wasn't planned in the original design. You can see here on opening day in Shanghai, during a typical day running through, the panel structure, variations in the color. And inside, just as the project here will have one, there's a theatre space with a lot of activity, things being explained, what it's like to be in Abu Dhabi, what its futures are like in the Emirates, everything will be going on. And there'll be a very totally different experience, I can assure you, in the one that you'll see here. But this is the sort of high spot of the experience of a lot of these expos. And here's the building now back in Abu Dhabi, reassembled, shipped and reassembled, and is now part of the arts complex. And there are kind of major exhibitions here, things like Dubai art or Abu Dhabi art, and more and more activities like this are going to take place in this overall building. So here now, the same building changed and transformed, all of the internal stuff removed, and a new use and a new life. And that concept of moving it was actually a key part of the design of the pavilion here. So right from day one now, everything has to be designed to be demounted and moved from this location ultimately back to Abu Dhabi. We think this might become a bit of a developing trend, particularly as the next expo will be in the Emirates. And at the bottom of that drum there is a little exhibition that will explain the 2020 expo. And we hope, we don't know yet, but we hope maybe some of the rules for that might be that the buildings get reused. If you talk about sustainability, if you talk about performance, this building does a lot of those things in terms of use of water, with the solar thermal collectors. But its biggest contribution is the fact that it will get reused 100% when it's taken back to its mother country. The design evolved through working with the client, the program, the idea of bringing people into the pavilion, allowing for queuing and crowd control and all those things, and bringing people through this route into where the gold drum is, where the performance will be, and then back out again. And on the right-hand side, the food and the restaurants, which is the theme and the topic of the whole expo itself. You hear some renderings when we were looking at it. And the challenge is with these things, when they originally started these expositions, I think the great exhibition in London in 1851, where all the produce from around the world was actually displayed, these things have been like a snapshot of what's happening around the world. I mean, today with the ease of travel to get from place to place, it seems less relevant, but not everybody flies like that, and a lot of people wouldn't know what the Emirates would like. What is Saudi Arabia like? What's Denmark like? What is these other countries? So the idea of going to here, bringing something to a location from another place and demonstrating it is really at the heart of what these expos are all about. So how can you do that? How can you bring the desert here? How can you design something that will work in Milan's climate and ultimately work in the climate in Abu Dhabi, which is very different? So those are some of the challenges that came through. And the idea of, a desert, what is a desert? How can we react to that? And the dunes have been great inspiration for a long time. And the idea of collecting data, getting information from this location, the beautiful big scale sweeps of these dunes and the incredible patterning just done by the wind and grains of sand, forming a pattern again and again and again, which is different every time and yet very similar. That seemed to us to be some source of inspiration, and the planning of this experience of moving through the pavilion tries to capture the feeling of that. It's not that, it can never be that, but something to do with the kind of scale, something to do with the feeling and the sculptural forms that nature creates out of this dust. How can we kind of bring some of that here? And to do it, although we did scan the desert, it sounds a bit strange, but we did scan some of the textures on there to get geometrical data. In the end, it has to fit a panel that can be made and moved around. So using that and translating the information that we'd scanned through a mathematical formula, which I don't ever understand, and I can't explain. I just have very good people in our office that can, but I certainly can't. How can we translate that and actually use it to form something that would be a component that we could actually panelize? And also repeat. You've got to join one to another one. So how can the panel, by growing it, if you determine the ends where everything lands, then you can make it extendable into a bigger panel, or indeed kind of interchangeable, one element moving with another. So a very sophisticated bit of patterning. And again, you then produce something that is totally dimensionally, physically, structural, all the forms that have got from the scanning translated into something that can be panelized and ultimately made with molds. And again, when you get this far, it's impossible to go any further without working very closely with everybody. And Trevor over there is the man who actually made all these panels and shipped them here. And I'm really glad he's here tonight. Not only him, but the panels, which is a major achievement, I can tell you. But it's only by working very closely with with manufacturers like that we can ever do the things that we do. And this is a very good example. Here's the different panel types and the way they're translated into the form. And again, here more information on that. How do you put it together? How do you make these pieces? And in what sequence can they all go together? Again, these are some of the results from the scanning. Different bits of desert scanned at different times. 1-to-1 scale, these are through here. Trying to decide which elements we should use and what we should build away from. And again, full-size pieces. This happens to be in our office, in our sort of 3D printing area. We didn't 3D print it, but it was machined out of foam to give an idea of how this could be developed. And again, through more detail modeling and working very closely over there with Trevor to develop panels larger than he wanted to make. We insisted on 12 meters. He wanted to do 10, but I'm very glad he kind of stuck with us and did it. Because the impression you get walking through here is very, very dramatic. And although it's not the desert, it can never be, you get the feeling of it, you get the essence of it as you're moving past this stuff. And the surface is slightly granular as well, which, quite an achievement. And light, building things together to keep cool, both in the summer here, but also for its longer-term future down in Abu Dhabi. And the nighttime imagery, again, this is just as construction's coming together. We still don't have an image of the final project yet, other than the ones that the two people who are based here have been taking, Roland and Holin. And they've spent the last sort of few months literally day and night on the site working with everybody else, which is a great thing. And you get some flavours of what it will be appearing like. This is the cladding on the central drum where the theatre is. And that's the final image. Thank you very much. Thank you.